To make this crochet cardigan, you're going to need a few different materials. The first is two different yarn colors. I'm using a cream and a black, and both the yarns don't have to be from like the exact same brand, but I do think it's a good idea to pick two different yarns that have a similar weight and thickness to them and also a similar fiber content. So the cream yarn is the 100% cotton KNC yarn from Joann Fabrics, and the black yarn is the I Love This Cotton yarn from Hobby Lobby. They feel exactly the same to me when I have them in my hands, so that's why I picked them. You'll also need a crochet hook that works with the size and weight of your yarn. So most yarn packaging will have like a recommended hook size. It recommended that I use a 5 millimeter crochet hook. However, I did decide to size down to a 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. And now having finished the garment, I think that I should have went with what was recommended on the packaging. I do feel like my granny squares did turn out to be tighter and smaller than what I was hoping for. It's not a big deal. Like, you should just use what you feel most comfortable with. But I think my granny squares would have been a little looser had I went with the larger hook size. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a darning needle to tuck your loose ends, and 4 stitch markers because when you're working up each of the granny squares, you want to mark where the corners are just to keep track of them as you go along. So I'm going to talk about the process a little bit before I start getting into the actual instructions. The cardigan is made up by creating a bunch of granny squares and joining them together. So for me, I'm going to make like a small to medium size cardigan, and I ended up making 42 granny squares total. I join all of my squares together by using the single crochet stitch, but if you feel most comfortable joining them together in a different method, like maybe you want to do it on the sewing machine or you want to do them by hand by using a darning needle, that's totally fine, whatever works for you. I'm also going to talk through how to make a larger size cardigan, more of like a large to extra large size measurement. And if you want to make yours bigger, so for my small to medium size, my measurement around my chest is about 34 and my waist is about 27, 28. If you want to go bigger, so let's say like 39 to 41 around the chest and about 5 inches bigger than the waist, so like 33 to 34. You're going to need to do 60 granny squares total. I'm going to show how to make the cardigan for the small to medium size, but whenever the instructions vary for the large to extra large size measurement, I'm going to talk through and try to be as clear as possible of what you need to do differently. So I think I did enough yapping. Let's get started on the actual instructions. I did my first granny square off camera, and this is how it turns out. I'm doing the exact same pattern for every single granny square, and this is the most simple granny square pattern there is. Like, it's just the granny stitch on every single row. The only challenging part is just the color change. So every few rows, you are going to switch between your first and second colors, but I'm going to show exactly where and how to do it. So it won't be too much of a challenge. I'm going to put this to the side for a while, and you're going to start with your center color, which for me is the cream. So I'm going to take my cream yarn and I'm going to begin by doing a magic circle. So you're going to do your magic circle, you're going to take the end of your yarn. This is the end of mine. And I'm going to lay it across 3 fingers on my left hand, just like that. This is the end. I'm going to hold it in place using my thumb. And then I'm going to wrap the yarn behind those 3 fingers, underneath those fingers, and then across the back of my hand, creating this X here. You're going to take your crochet hook and insert it underneath the yarn that's on the right and hook it onto the yarn that's on the left, pulling it under and kind of twisting your hook so that you create this X on your hook. From here, you can take your fingers out, and this circle here, this is where you're going to work your crocheting around. So I'm going to yarn over and chain 1, yarn over, chain 2. Those 2 chains are going to count as your first double crochet. So now I'm going to do 2 more double crochets. This is 1, and this is 2. I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets. So this is 1, 2, 3. I'm going to chain 2 again. 1, 2, and then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets, chain 2 again, and then 3 more double crochets. And lastly, I'm going to chain 2 again. So from here, I'm going to take the short piece of yarn that I started with. So this was my very end, and I'm going to pull this, and that's going to tighten up that center circle. So you can see that you're starting to form a square. From here, you're going to slip stitch into that very first double crochet stitch that you did, and that closes up your circle. And if you notice, every time we did those 2 chain spaces that created kind of like a hole, those are going to be the 4 corners of the square. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And a tip that you can do is to add your stitch markers to each of those spaces. And that way you'll be able to easily keep track of your corners for your square. Because sometimes when you're working, you might like lose track of where they actually are. Okay, so there is my square. And from here, I'm going to cut my yarn, my working yarn, because we're switching colors for the next row. And I'm going to yarn over and pull the yarn all the way through. And that way it won't unravel. So this is my square. At the end, when you're finished with the entire square, you're going to take your darning needle and tuck all your loose ends. And so that'll hold the center circle in place so that it won't keep loosening up. But while you're working, it probably will loosen up a little bit. So now I'm going to switch to my second yarn, which for me is the black. All right, so you're going to reinsert your crochet hook into any of those chain spaces. So I'm going to work into the chain space that is to the left of my end piece. I'm going to take my second yarn, yarn over your hook, and pull it through. And then you're going to take the short piece or the end piece and yarn over, pull it all the way through, reinsert your crochet hook, yarn over with your working yarn, chain 1, yarn over, chain 2. So there you were just reattaching your yarn to your square. And those first 2 chains, that's going to count as your first double crochet. So you're going to yarn over and do 2 more double crochets. 1, 2, chain 2, and then do 3 more double crochets into that same space. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So you just created the first corner of the second row. So from here on out, whenever I say work a corner, that's the pattern you're going to do. 3 double crochets, 2 chains, and then 3 more double crochets. So now we're going to get to our second corner. So we just finished our third double crochet. You're going to chain 1 and then do 3 double crochets. But before you continue on with that, you can move your stitch marker to the next row. So I did 1 double crochet. Now I'm going to do 2 and 3. Chain 2 and then 3 more double crochets into that same space. I'm going to move my stitch marker up a row, chain 1, and then work this next corner. So 3 double crochets, 2 chains, and then 3 more double crochets. Move your stitch marker up, chain one, and then in your last corner, you're going to do the same thing, 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, 2 chains, and then 3 more double crochets. Chain one and move your stitch marker. And then you're going to slip stitch into that very first double crochet stitch that you did. Yarn over and then slip stitch. Okay, and then you can cut your yarn pretty long. Yarn over and pull all the way through. So this is the second row, and this is how your square should be looking. So from here, you're going to switch back to your first yarn color, which for me is the cream again. And you're going to start this off like you did the second row. So you're going to pick whatever corner you want to start with, insert your crochet hook, yarn over with your first yarn color, pull the yarn through, take your short piece and pull it all the way through so it doesn't unravel. Reinsert your crochet hook, yarn over, chain two, and then do 2 double crochets into that space. So this is 1, 2, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets. So for this row, you have space in between each side of the square. You're not going to create a corner into this center space right here. You're going to work the granny stitch. So after you did your third double crochet to create this corner, you're going to chain 1, and then you're going to do 3 double crochets into that center space here. 1, 2, 3, chain 1 again, and then you're back at your corner, so you're going to work this corner the same way you did the others. So this would be 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets. And you can move your stitch markers up. I forgot to do it for the first corner. And then I'm back to the center of this side, so I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to do 3 double crochets into that center space. Chain 1, and then work this next corner. Chain 2, 3 more double crochets. I just finished that corner, so I'm going to move my stitch marker up. Chain 1, and then I'm at the center of this side, so I'm going to do 3 double crochets into this space. 1, 2, 3, chain 1. I'm going to work this last corner. Chain 2, and then finish off this corner. I just chain 1. I'm going to do 3 double crochets into this last center space. Chain 1, and then I'm back at my first double crochet stitch, but for this next row, I'm not switching colors. So I have to get my working yarn into this corner space here. I'm going to slip stitch into that first double crochet of this row. And then I'm going to slip stitch again into the second double crochet here. And then I'll slip stitch for the last time into that chain 2 space. So now my working yarn is at the center of that corner. So I can chain 2, creating my first double crochet, and then I'm going to do 2 more double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into this space. So that is how that looks. I'm going to pull some more of my yarn. Chain 1, and then I'm going to work across this row, and at these 2 center spaces, this is just where I do the granny stitch. So I'm going to do 3 double crochets into this space, chain 1, and then 3 more double crochets into this next center space, chain 1, and then I'm going to work this corner. I'm going to move up my stitch marker, and I forgot to do the first one. So now I'm going to continue to crochet until I get back to my first double crochet of this row, just continuing to do the granny stitch around. So I'm at the last space on this side. I'm going to finish it with 3 double crochets, and then I'm going to chain 1 and slip stitch into that very first double crochet. Since I'm switching colors again for this next row, I can cut my yarn and pull it all the way through. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to my second color, which is the black. And for this next row, you don't need to move your stitch markers up. You can kind of just take them out as you go. But I'm going to reattach my yarn. I'm going to take my short piece and pull it all the way through so it doesn't unravel. I'm going to start with 2 double crochets into this corner space. 2. I'm going to chain 2 and then 3 more double crochets into that space. Chain 1, and then I'm going to work the granny stitch across this row. Okay, so now I'm at the last space of this row. I'm going to finish this off with 3 double crochets into that space. So this is 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the very first double crochet of this row. Yarn over, and then I'm just going to pull it through and cut my yarn because I'm done. Okay, so that is my granny square. And it looks pretty similar to the first one that I did. So now I'm gonna come back when all my granny squares are done. I finished the rest of my granny squares off camera. I have a total of 42. However, if you're doing the large to extra large size, you're gonna have 60 instead. And for the majority of them, I tuck the loose ends off camera as well. I'm gonna show exactly how I do it in this next part, but if you have a particular way of tucking the loose ends, I'm sure that's totally fine. It's probably the same way I do it. It's just really important that you keep each color within each section, and that way you won't have like one color peeking through another color. It'll stay seamless looking, like this is mine. You don't see any of the white within the black section or any of the black within the white section. That's exactly what you're going for. And it looks the same on the front and on the back. So I'm gonna put these to the side for a second and focus on the ones that aren't completely finished. All right, so for this part, I'm gonna need my darning needle. You can put your crochet hook to the side. And I'm gonna start by working on tucking the loose ends from the center outward. I'm gonna insert this first loose end. This is the one that is attached to the center circle into my darning needle. So this center circle, it tends to come loose like while you were crocheting the entire square. It's important to tuck this first piece around that circle several times, like as many times as you feel comfortable with, because that'll hold the circle closed and keep it tight the way you want it to. So I pull the yarn pulls from this direction. So I'm going to tuck this yarn the opposite direction. This is going to be counterclockwise for me. So inserting my crochet hook into the bottom part of these double crochet stitches. And then as I go, I'm going to tighten the yarn. Okay. So I've tucked this piece around the circle a few times. I want to say it's been at least 5 times. I feel like that's more than enough. And this center part is getting kind of like thick, if you could feel it. Like you can see that it's standing up a little bit. So I'm going to take my darning needle off that piece of yarn and I'm going to move on to the second piece, the second white piece that is attached to that center square part. And so my goal with this second piece, I want to tie this into a knot with this one. So I need to bring this yarn down to the center and I want to tuck this one around the circle in the opposite direction of this one time. So I'm going to insert my darning needle down the double crochet stitch. I had started out like at the top of the double crochet stitch because that's where you cut the yarn to switch to the black color. But now I'm working down to the center and then I'm going to insert the darning needle around this circle in this direction. So this would be clockwise. Originally we went counterclockwise. So now I have both pieces of yarn at the exact same spot. I'm going to tie them in a knot, actually 2 knots to secure it. And then at this point, I feel like that center circle is nice and tight. I can cut my yarn. Okay. So the next 2 pieces of yarn are this black from the next row. I'm going to tuck these 2 pieces and I'm going to try to move to tuck them in the opposite direction. So this one, I'm going to tuck it this way. This one, I'll tuck this way. So this piece right here, it starts at like the bottom of this double crochet stitch. I'm going to go, it's kind of weird the way I do it, but I feel like this hides the yarn the best way for me. I'm going to go up this double crochet stitch. So tucking the yarn in between that double crochet stitch, then I'm going to go in between like here where this white double crochet is, but it's going to be inside of the double crochet, so you won't be able to see it. Then I'll move down this double crochet stitch right here, through this part right here, and this part right here, and then back up here through this white area right here. And by then I should be out of yarn. So I'm just trying to hide the black yarn as best I can. If I were to just tuck it straight across here, you would see like a little bit of the black yarn over top of this first row of the white double crochet stitches. I don't want that. I don't like how that looks. So this is just my way of tucking it. But I'm going up this double crochet stitch, working in the center of the double crochet, like it's not completely behind it like this. It's inside of it. Okay. Then I turn it as I go. I'm working inside of this white double crochet stitch. Then I'm going to go down this double crochet stitch. And then I'll insert my yarn inside the bottom of this black double crochet stitch. And then inside of this part. And then I'm going to try to go up this double crochet stitch. I'm running out of yarn. I'm going to turn it and try to insert it into this white part. Okay, so right now my yarn is too short to keep tucking it, but I'm going to insert the darning needle inside of this stitch as well. And I'm going to tuck the yarn, well, insert the yarn into the hook. I'm pulling it through. And then for this last part, I'm going to try and tuck this little piece right here inside the center of this bottom double crochet stitch. So I just have like a centimeter left. I can't really do much with that. At this point, I can cut my yarn. Okay, so that piece is completely hidden. You don't see it in the white part, and of course you wouldn't be able to see it in the black. So now I'm going to move on to this next black piece. Since I tucked the first one this direction, clockwise, I'm going to tuck this one counterclockwise in this direction. So I'm going to first start it off by going in between the bottom of this white double crochet row. Now I'm going to go down this black double crochet stitch. I'm going to go through the bottom of these black double crochet stitches. You see how it kind of turns? It's a corner. I'm going through the bottom of here and then through here. Okay, then I'm going to go up this double crochet stitch. And then I'm going to go through the bottom of this white double crochet stitch. I have a little bit of yarn left, so I think I can make it through the bottom of this one. And then I'm going to try and work through the bottom of this row of double crochets. And that's probably going to be the end of this one. And it is. All right, so cut the loose ends. Cool. So now you can't see the black at all. So now I'm going to work on these white pieces. I'm going to work up this double crochet stitch here in between this one. Okay, down this double crochet stitch and through the bottom of these white double crochet stitches, up these double crochet stitches, through the bottom of these double crochet stitches, and then down this one. I probably should have cut my loose ends a little longer. Okay, and then through the bottom of here, and I think that'll be the end for this one. All right, now on to this next white piece. So I'm going to start by tucking this in the bottom of these black double crochet stitches. Okay, and I'm going to cut this loose end. And now in the last two pieces, the two end pieces are black. You have to tuck these along the edge. So if I'm taking this piece right here, inserting my darning needle. So there's less space to tuck when you get to the edge part. This part is like a little bit harder, but not impossible. I'm going to start by inserting my darning needle into that chain part right here. So there's a chain space right here. There's a chain one in between this cluster and this cluster. I'm going to insert my darning needle in between that chain, pull it through, and then I'm going to tuck my darning needle or insert my darning needle down this double crochet stitch right here. Then I'm going to go in between the bottom of these double crochet stitches, this cluster right here. I'm going to go up this double crochet stitch right here. Then I'll insert into that chain one space. I'm going to go down this double crochet stitch right here, through the bottom of these double crochet stitches. And I'm at the end of my yarn, so I'll only be able to go up this double crochet stitch right here. And from here, I can cut my yarn. Okay, so that side is done. Now I'm going to tuck this last loose piece. So I'm going to work up this double crochet stitch right here. My yarn is attached right here at this edge where my darning needle is pointing. I'm going to go up this double crochet stitch. Then I'm going to go through this chain stitch that is connecting these two clusters. I'm going to go down this double crochet stitch right here. I'm going to go in between the bottom of these double crochet stitches right here. I'm going to go up this double crochet stitch, in between this chain stitch, and then down this double crochet stitch, in between the bottom of these double crochet stitch. This is the third cluster from the end. And my yarn is getting short again. So I'm just going to go up this last double crochet stitch right here, and that's where I'll cut the yarn. And that is my granny square. So it looks the same on this side and on this side. None of the yarn is peeking through opposite color sections. It looks very seamless. So I'm going to tuck the rest of the loose ends, and I'll come back when I'm done and show how to join the squares to create the actual sweater. I finished tucking all of my loose ends off camera, and so now all my squares are clean and good to go. Now I can start joining them. To join them, I'm going to use the single crochet stitch method. I just prefer that one because I like the raised texture that it creates at each of the seams. But if you prefer to join your squares by using like a darning needle to sew them together, or by sewing them on the machine, that's totally fine too. So for this next part, we're going to create several different panels that are rectangular and square shape that are going to make up the different parts of the cardigan. I want to make a small, medium-sized cardigan. So I'm going to make two panels that are 2x3 granny squares, and that's going to make up the front part. I'm going to do two more panels that are 3x3 squares, and that's gonna make up each of the sleeves. And I'm gonna do one panel that is 4 by 3 squares, and that's gonna make up the back part of the cardigan. If you wanna make a slightly larger cardigan, like a large or extra large, you're gonna do 2 panels that are 2 by 4, and that's gonna make up the front. It's gonna be a little bit longer. You're gonna do 2 more that are 3 by 4, and that's gonna make up the sleeves. And you're gonna do 1 panel that's gonna be 5 by 4, and that's gonna make up the back part. So in order to join them, you're going to take your squares, put them wrong sides together. The part that you're seeing right here, this is the front side of each of the squares. The part that's facing up is the front side or right side, and the side that you're not seeing is the wrong side. It's completely up to you which side you want to be the right side and the wrong side. I just prefer this side. I think it looks a little better. And on the back, you can see where like I tied the knot with my yarn. So I don't want this part visible. I want this part to show. So this is my right side. I'm gonna take 2 of the squares and match them wrong sides together. And then I'm gonna single crochet across this edge. I'll reattach my yarn here and then work my way across. And then without cutting the yarn, I'm gonna join these 2, single crochet across, and then do the same here, single crochet across. And then from there, this panel is going to be connected down this entire seam. I'll reattach my yarn here and then single crochet across here, reattach here, single crochet across, and then you'll have one of the front panels done. So to get started, I'm going to take my working yarn. I'm going to take my crochet hook and insert it into that corner on the edge of these 2 squares. I'm going to yarn over and then pull it through. And then I'll take the short piece of the yarn over and pull it all the way through. This kind of stops it from unraveling as you work. Reinsert your crochet hook into that space, into that loop that you created. And then you'll yarn over again and pull up 1 and then single crochet across this row. So I'm going to do 1 single crochet within that chain space that we have. And then you're going to try to do 1 single crochet into each double crochet stitch. So you have clusters of 3. And then when you get to those chain spaces, you're going to do 1 single crochet in that part as well. So now I'm at that corner space again. I'm going to do 1 more single crochet into that corner space. And then I'm going to take my next 2 squares, matching them wrong sides together. And I'm going to single crochet into that space. All right, so that's how it joins. And then continue across this row. So now I'm at the end of these 2 squares. I'm going to join these 2 wrong sides together again. And then I'm going to single crochet into that corner space. And then continue across this row. So now I finished joining those 6 squares. I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a pretty decent length. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull it all the way through. So this is how this part looks. Kind of crazy at this point, but we're going to single crochet down this side and down this side to join them, and that'll fix that issue. So I'm going to reattach my yarn to this corner. yarn over, and then pull it all the way through using the short piece. Reinsert your hook, yarn over, and then pull up one loop. You're going to start by doing a single crochet stitch into that chain space, and then single crochet across the row. So I'm at the part where I join the squares on this side, and you could either just single crochet into the next chain space. I did just do one single crochet in that chain space, but you're just gonna fit one single crochet on top of this line on this single crochet stitch from the previous row. So whichever one is like right over top of where you're joining, just fit a single crochet in there somehow, and then work into the chain space next to it, and then you continue on like you normally would. I'm at the end of my row. I'm gonna finish with one last single crochet into that chain space, pull my yarn through, cut it, and this is how it's looking. It's joined here. You can't pull it apart. You can't pull it apart here. So I'm gonna do the same stitch right here. All right, this panel is completely joined. You can't pull it apart. All the granny squares are connected. So I did create more loose ends by doing this, which is kind of annoying. But at the end, we're gonna have to retuck all of these pieces. But this is how the first front panel will look. I'm gonna finish joining the rest of the panels off camera using those measurements that I stated before. And at this point, my video is getting kind of long, so you're gonna have to switch to part 2 to get the rest of the tutorial.